So I'm working on this little project. I want to make one of these pots from Elden Ring. This is Iron Fist Alexander. He is a warrior jar. I was thinking it'd be cool to make a little one and then put some red wax in it and then sort of print that seal on the top. I think that would be pretty cool to make that out of terracotta because I've got some downstairs and a furnace to fire it in. So I was looking around. You can get, people have made some really awesome 3D prints, but I want just a hollow void in something that I can pack with clay and then remove the mold and then fire the clay. So I set about looking at various options around there. People have modelled this character a lot, but they're all wrong in subtle ways. They're all slightly too fiddly. I bought one of them for a couple of dollars. It was a nice model. But they've got various problems, including flat bits on the model. So here's the model in Blender. So the arm is supposed to go here. I don't want that. I want the full thing. Also, I want it to be filled in at the top. But that aside, I thought I'd set about putting together a little mold. So this is 1/4 of the mold, and the clay would be packed onto the inside face here. Well, you print 4 of these things, 3D print 4 of them with these little locating spheres to clamp them together accurately. Pack a layer of clay on the inside, wait for it to dry, pop the mold off, and then fire it. So this is just a 30mm sphere that I'm doing, a 30mm radius sphere that I'm doing for a test. And when I'm finished printing what I'm currently printing, I'll buy out some of them and give it a test. So I've fired up the 3D printer for the first time since we moved in, and it's been relatively trouble-free. I've been quite happy. Right now I'm printing one of the flame race things that a bloke on YouTube did a little while ago. Someone mold, Steve mold. I thought they were pretty cool. Surprisingly, I was able to print something that fills the whole bed without having to level the bed after the move, which is surprising. But it's been going great. So after this is done, I'll print some of those molds, and I might be able to do the clay tonight if it hasn't set into a solid brick by now. I've been very generously offered some help with making the 3D model, or tidying it up, or making it fresh, whichever is necessary. So that is presently underway, and yeah, should be cool. Goodbye. So I've got some clay, buff raku trachyte. This is like general purpose modeling terracotta. It's got some grog, little chunks of fired clay mixed in with it, which helps it not explode when you're firing it. It makes it less good for turning because the grit is really hard on your hands. I've got some smoother stuff downstairs for throwing bowls and stuff on a table, spinning thingamabob, but this stuff is good for just molding by hand. So here's 4 of those pieces printed and joined together with some cable ties. I probably should have taken a photo after the print, but before I joined them together, but there's basically a hollow sphere shape inside here. So I've knocked off the biggest chunks of sort of stray print detritus. The filament that I'm using is quite old and wet, so there's a lot of blobulence. I think if I'm making a nice, I'll do some testing with this rubbish filament. I've got some fresh filament there, but I think for the final version that I want to be actually super nice, I might get that resin printed if possible, so I can get rid of the fine lines. This stuff is printed with a 0.3mm layer height. I can go down smaller on my printer, which will get better resolution, better surface texture. But I'm not sure how big a deal it's going to be, because once I've put the clay in there and taken it out after it's dried, I can sort of just rub the surface a little bit, build up a layer of slip, and sort of smooth out the lines. But the trick will be on, like, I want to be able to preserve the fine detail, and preserving fine detail and getting rid of even finer detail is sort of a balancing act. So I'm going to take some of this, and I'm just going to have a play with sort of packing it on the inside of this face here. It might not stick, or it might be hard to get a consistent thickness. I'm going to have a bit of a play around. I might roll it into a snake and then sort of spiral the snake up to try to give some semblance of control of the thickness. That might work all right. I've got the option of taking the outside off while it's still wet, if that works and doesn't just fall to pieces, and then using a pin probe to go around and measure the depth, like poke it through, see where it comes out, and then that's the depth of the clay, just to try to get a consistent thickness. It doesn't really matter. If I go too thick, it's not a problem. With this stuff, you can have quite thick layers of clay and not worry about trapped air bubbles exploding it when it fires. I've also vaguely thought about getting compressed air, like packing a relatively thin layer and then getting compressed air and some sort of seal or cap to sort of force the clay out against the outside or the inside of the mold. Not sure if that will work or be helpful, but got some ideas. All right, that's where I'm at. It does stick a little bit. This definitely is too dry for this. Need to put a bit of water on this and let it sit for a bit. Also, this is a fresh block, hasn't been wedged at all, so it's going to be a bit hard to manipulate. I might do that now. Alright, wet a little bit, maybe a bit too much. But, see how we go. Yeah, it's probably a little bit too wet, but the only real cost of that is it'll take longer to dry before I can fire it. If it doesn't get unusably sticky. Yeah, a bit too sticky. That one. I'll make it work. Yes. Much stickier and less likely to sort of slide around on the plastic. Where's my light? So the problem with clay is everything gets clay on it. Okay, I think that strategy might work for getting a relatively even thickness. I mean, I could just go crazy and just stuff it in there and then sort of shove my thumb in the middle for a test piece. I want to be able to fire it relatively soon. Let's try the snake. See how far the snake technique gets us. just a bit slow is all. Not really sure how valuable how much value the camera is providing to you right now. I don't know if you can see down inside there, but I can. It's working all right. I'm going to carry on with this and get a bit more clay on my camera. Okay, so I've got clay all over the inside, relatively even layer, and now I'm just going through pinching it up against the sides to make sure that the pattern on the inside of the mold transfers authentically to the outside of the clay. So this pattern is just a sphere, but it's like a 36 squared quad, I guess, sphere. So I should be able to see like the facets of the model reflected on the outside. And I'm just going through and sort of smoothing it a little bit. Smoothness of the inside doesn't really matter that much, but it would be nice. I think for the next one, I will raise the lip up a little bit here, because this model is a cube with a sphere inside that has been shifted up 10 millimeters. That's it. No mess, no fuss. But that means that this top edge must necessarily come to a sharp point. I think I will add an extra riser around here so I can get a better feel for how thick it is right at the top, because right now this clay tapers to a sharp edge, except here where you can see it's got a bit of thickness to it. So I'd like to have that all the way around, but it's a bit hard to do that consistently. I'll try to work the clay up a little bit to get that, because I don't want a knife edge on the clay, because that'll be very easy to chip. The final model has a sort of a rim built into it that isn't in this sphere, obviously. So that will help with that a little bit. But yeah, that's worked pretty well. Don't know how long I'm going to have to wait for it to dry. I put a little bit too much water in the clay, so it's going to be pretty sticky, as you can see. And what I don't want to do is pull the mold apart and have the clay tear as it sticks to the mold, because I am working the clay into the mold quite thoroughly, so it's going to have a good bond. The clay will shrink as it dries, so that will help a little bit. It will try to pull free of the mold. So I might just leave it air dry for a week or so, just to minimize the risk of it coming to pieces when I pull the mold apart. I don't think there's any kind of mold release I could smear on the inside of the mold. I've got some talcum powder, but I'm pretty sure that would just get wet. Some Vaseline might work. That would burn off entirely during the firing. That might be an option. I don't know. Got some ideas. Okay. That's good enough for now. Now goodbye. So it's been out in the sun for a couple of hours, and I can already see that it's starting to, clay is starting to separate from the plastic, but I can also see that the clay is starting to crack down inside there. So it looks as though I didn't join the snakes together well enough, or I was drying it too quickly by putting it in the sun. But let's see how we go. Oh, hold on. Next version will have bolts to hold it together. So not total success, not total failure though. So we can see, even though I was very thorough at squishing the clay up against the inside, still wasn't pushing hard enough, it seems. I was worried about creating thin spots if I push too hard. But it is very well bonded at the bottom, so maybe it's just a factor of, because it's harder to squish up against this side than it is to squish against the bottom. Because the bottom you're just pushing straight down. That and the bottom clay might have been wetter when it went in, but I'm not sure if that's coming across on the camera, but you can see that the pattern, the really fine detail has transferred over really well. So you can see the layer lines from the FDM prints quite clearly. So it looks as though I need to be more thorough with my squishing, because I don't think that has opened up due to it drying too fast. That looks as though it was always there when it was wet. Let's see if I can get these. No, see, it's really well bonded to the bottom, but where it's had a chance to dry or where it was never particularly well bonded in the first place, it is more amenable to letting go. I am going to rip another chunk out the bottom here. But I'm looking at the thickness there, and it is, we've got relatively good consistency. I mean, it's that there is about 2/3 or half actually the thickness of over here. So it looks like the snake approach might work if I get some better technique. Or if I use wetter clay, or if I let it dry more thoroughly before trying to take it out. Because the other approach I'd like to try is I'll clamp all this back up again and then get some relatively wet clay and just pack it in there real hard, and then just sort of smoosh my thumb down in and sort of scoop out a void in the center for, you know, whatever you want to put inside the pot, because it doesn't need to be hollow all the way around on the inside. It can just be like a cylinder that goes down and the walls are really thick. Great thing about prototyping with clay is that I can just wet this and it turns back into clay and I can use it again. No wastage. But I'm happy with the detail transfer. I'm optimistic that when I do a nice print with the actual pattern I want, it will transfer across to the clay. I may have to get it resin printed to get the best quality, because I really don't want to see these layer lines. But yeah. So yeah, you can see the thickness there quite clearly. And you can also, I'm not sure if it comes across in the camera, but you can see the little flakes of grog in there, the smashed up pottery. I'd say if I let this dry fully, it would have come out in one piece, but I still would have had these cracks from where the snakes didn't fully consolidate together. Cool. I will continue to experiment.